Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Josh, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a quick comparison between the stabilization on the Panasonic S5 and the GH6. Now if you haven't already seen it, I was very lucky and fortunate to get hands on the GH6 before its initial launch, which meant I could test out all the great features and stuff prior to its actual release, and that was fantastic. But of course, as I was expecting, I was getting loads of questions asking me to compare some of the specs of the GH6 to my beloved S5, one of those being the stabilization. So what I thought I'd do in the very short time that I had the camera is do a quick test between the S5 and the GH6. So I did two tests. I did one where I basically got my girlfriend to sort of walk away from me, and then another one where I was just trying to hold the camera as steady as possible at 105mm equivalent on both. So on the Panasonic S5, I was using the 24-105 f4, and then on the GH6, I was using the 12-60 kit lens that comes with it. Both are stabilized lenses, and both are of course made by Panasonic as sort of kit lenses, if you like. So I thought that was the most fair comparison that I could draw up between the two. It's also worth noting that I didn't have any cages or rigs on any of these bodies. It was literally just camera body and lens for both, so therefore there's no trickery in terms of one having more weight to the other one. This is literally bare bones as you would carry the camera once you got it out of the box. So yeah, anyway, getting into it now. Okay, so to start off with, I did with all stabilization off on the GH6 and the S5. And what I'll do is I'll have the GH6 and S5, then both of them on a split screen together. That's how I'll do every single comparison. And as you can see, they're both pretty shaky with everything off. Okay, so now moving on to the lens stabilization activated on both of these cameras. Now, if I'm not mistaken, when you turn the lens stabilization on, the IBIS inside the body automatically turns on as well. So therefore, you can't have the IBIS off and the lens stabilization on, and vice versa if you're using a stabilized lens. So therefore, in this video, it says stabilization on for the lens. It means that the IBIS is also activated as well. So you get an idea of how both are working together to get the stabilization. But yeah, anyway, here we go. So GH6 first, and as you can see, it's done so much to compensate for all those shakes and stuff. And then with the S5, again, same sort of story. I wouldn't say that anyone's particularly better in this use case. I think that they're both pretty decent. And as you can see here on the side-by-side, yeah. And in my opinion, I say that lens stabilization is probably the most powerful sort of stabilization you can get in camera systems. And what I've found quite a lot of the time is that the lens IS makes a huge difference compared to having nothing at all. But yeah, anyway. Now moving on to the GH6 lens stabilization and E-stabilization. And yeah, that again is a step up sort of thing. Like this is definitely usable. Yeah, and the same with the S5. I think that the E-stabilization does really help a lot. Of course, you might see some sort of like movement in the frame a little bit more, like the sort of electronic stabilization sort of fighting against your movement a little bit, and that's to be expected and stuff. But of course, I'd say that with these sort of stabilization types, it's still extremely impressive. And I mean, bearing in mind, I am just hand holding this just as a bare camera, and of course, just walking along following my girlfriend. So it's not like I'm doing anything special or anything. And you can see this on the side-by-side actually, that the GH6 seems to be a little bit better, you know, with this sort of thing. Okay, so now let's move on to the lens stabilization and Boost IS. Now, just to preface this beforehand, Boost IS was actually designed by Panasonic to be a sort of locked off tripod look. So when you do move around with Boost IS, you can sometimes see it fighting against your movements. So this is, you know, obviously to be expected. And I was expecting this going into doing this sort of, this comparison, is that you would sometimes see, you know, the frame sort of shift slightly where the Boost IS is trying to compensate for the movement, because again, it's designed to be for a static locked off shot, and it's an absolutely insane job for that sort of use case. But yeah, I thought I'd show you guys anyway. So here we go. Yeah, it's insane. Like the GH6 stabilization with the Boost IS is really bloody good. And then same with the S5 as well. I mean, it is a little bit shakier. I can definitely see that the Boost IS is fighting against me a little bit more on the S5. But still, I'd say that both are definitely usable. It's also worth mentioning that I'm shooting 4K 25p 422 10-bit long GAB compression on both these cameras. So you're seeing what it looks like without any post-stabilization. Like, I'm not adding any stabilization inside a Final Cut. I'm not slowing down the footage at all. This is literally what it is shooting at 25p. Okay, so then the final test I actually did for movement is I did a light jog test for both the cameras, and I had the lens IS and of course the IBIS activated on both of them, so you can see what it looks like when you are sort of jogging at a fair pace, so to speak. And of course it's going to be worse that way because you're moving a lot more, and you can't control your movement as such when you are moving a little bit quicker. But again, I wanted to, you know, show you guys what that looks like. So here we go, GH6 time. I mean, it does a really bloody good job, to be honest. And then the S5 as well. I'd definitely say that the S5 struggles a bit more when it comes to the sort of like fast moving stuff. But that's to be expected, of course. You know, the GH6 does have an extra stop, or a stop and a half, I believe. I'll put it on the screen if I'm wrong, of stabilization, of course, and the lens IS being really powerful like it is. But yeah, you can sort of see how they both perform in that sense. Okay, so now time to go for the locked off shots. So what I did was had both cameras set to 105mm, as I said beforehand. So yeah, let's get into that. So it is Shake City without stabilization on with the GH6, as you can see. And then as soon as you turn on that lens stabilization, it gets so much better. And it's actually night and day, which is absolutely crazy. And then Boost IS again is another stop. I mean, that is insane. Like, if you were pretty careful with it, it would literally look like you were locked off on a tripod. And that's where the Boost IS and lens stabilization really come in handy with Panasonic cameras. Like, it's so effective, especially if you are just trying to shoot something where you're standing still and at a sort of like really long focal length. Okay, so now let's do the same thing with the S5. So stabilization off, it looks a bit schizophrenic, which is absolutely fine. That's what's to be expected. And then with stabilization on, does a fantastic job of correcting that all. And then Boost IS as well, it looks absolutely fantastic. Now, if I had to give the edge between any of them, I'd definitely say that the GH6 did perform better on this test when you're not moving around. It was very marginal, but to my eye, I can definitely see that GH6 does a little bit better at compensating for those shakes. So yeah, I mean, after comparing both the S5 and the GH6 together in this stabilization test, I'm actually going to say that I'm shocked at how little there is between the two when you start to add the different stabilization types in camera. Like, I was expecting the difference to be quite night and day between the two, considering the GH6 is a much smaller sensor with a much more powerful IBIS system, and of course with a bigger body for that really small sensor to move around in. But if I'm being completely honest, I still think the S5 stabilization does hold up against it. And if I was trying to buy a camera purely for IBIS, it becomes a bit of a hard sell for me with the GH6, if I'm going to be honest with you, because the S5 is already really good. And of course you get the full frame sensor, so you get the better dynamic range, you get the more sort of light being allowed in, and just generally the full frame look is nicer than Micro Four Thirds in my opinion. And the stabilization isn't too far behind. So if you are someone that's sort of thinking, oh okay, well I want the best stabilization possible, so therefore I should go for the GH6. Technically you are correct, so the GH6 would have slightly better stabilization in body, so you know, if you do not want to shoot with a gimbal at all, then you probably get slightly better performance from the GH6, but the difference is not as night and day as I was expecting it to be, which is really interesting. And again, I think hopefully this is going to, you know, sort of inform some of you guys if you've been on the fence and want to know how the full frame cameras and of course the GH6 compare in terms of their stabilization. So yeah, anyway, this is just a very quick and dirty comparison between the two cameras. Like I said at the start of the video, I didn't have the GH6 for too long, and of course I wanted to test out as much as I could, and especially compare it to the S5 since I knew that was to be a popular topic. But yeah, so even though this was quick and dirty, I still do think that it does show this sort of test in a really good way, and I do think that you get to see how both stabilization types in the GH6 and S5 compare to each other. So yeah, I hope you found it somewhat useful or interesting, and if you did, then please let me know. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Like I just said, if you did find it useful and entertaining, then please consider subscribing, because I do make a lot of content here surrounding the S series and Panasonic stuff. So if that's your sort of jam, then this channel's for you. So yeah, hopefully I shall see you in the next one. Thank you.